graduation from Leeds, and I think at the same time Dan was doing his skydiving for the Teenage Cancer Trust. Gabby's friend had sadly passed away from cancer at quite a young age, and I remember that Dan and Noor had decided to do this crazy skydive and raise some money for
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
charity.
Yeah. No, I remember, I think Mum and I driving them down to some airfield somewhere, and him standing, getting ready, posing for a couple of photos, looking like Tom Cruise from Top Gun. Very excited, but equally nervous, trepidation.
I think Mum was probably more scared and nervous than Dan, even.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Hello and welcome to season 1, episode 1 of the wonderful podcast. I'm Kieran James, CEO and co-founder. I've been involved in tech businesses for, well, more years than I care to remember, but quite a long time. In telecoms, in domain name registration, company formations, the whole gamut of IT businesses. Here with a new podcast talking about the current business, and I'd love to introduce my daughter Carmen.
I'm Carmen. I am co-founder and head of operations of Wonderful. So I did a undergraduate degree in zoology, went on to do a master's in a similar sort of field, and have now ended up doing head of operations, which is probably quite a weird and different path to what I thought I would follow, but I'm really, really enjoying it.
In a fintech business as well. So
in a fintech, yeah. Nothing to do with animals, nothing to do with zoology or evolution or conservation or anything like that. But hey, nonetheless, I'm really, really enjoying it.
Although some might argue you're working just in a different kind of jungle these days, but
yes,
we'll come to that. So yeah, just picking up on that story, Dan. I think it's really interesting because it's very much how we got started with a lot of this. It was the genesis of an idea about, is it possible to be successful, to do well, and also to do good. I think that really that was probably the very first starting point. I distinctly remember sitting, waiting. I think we're all sitting around the table. We were about to eat. Dan storming downstairs, really frustrated and quite cross about the amount that had been deducted from his fundraising activity via the platform that he was using at the time to raise money.
And like platform fees to cover things like card processing, I guess, and stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, platform fees. I think card processing on top of the platform fees deducted separately. And I think, the deductions from gift aid, that tended to be the starting point. We'll take some money from gift aid, which I think he was just frustrated and I think quite surprised as well.
Yeah, I remember. I didn't know when he said it to everyone. I'd donated quite a few times to friends over the years at that point in my life, and I had no idea that there were fees being lost along the way from my donation. So I don't think he was the only one, but as a fundraiser, I can imagine it's even more frustrating.
Completely, yeah. So I think that was the starting point for, at least for me, was thinking, well, I wonder if there's any alternative to that. I wonder if there's another way of doing it. Is there another platform exists out there that doesn't charge fees of any sort? 2015, so nearly 10 years ago. We're hurtling towards a 10th anniversary and so on. But that was basically when we first started thinking about this as a possible route. And we were heading towards, that was July, I think you did your skydive, but as we hit autumn and so on, that started to crystallize a little bit, the thinking around that. And coming up 2016, and you'll remember a few bits and pieces that were happening in 2016.
Yeah, so I remember that year was the year of lots of important birthdays. It was your anniversary, yours and Mum's anniversary, 25th, I think it was.
It was.
Gabby, my younger sister's 21st, and Dan's 18th as well, and it was your 50th.
And my 50th, yeah, lots to celebrate. And I think we were all thinking, well, we should try and mark this year. There's quite a bit going on. I think you were the only person that didn't have a significant birthday.
Yeah, I was just on my gap year in South America trying to figure out what on earth to do with my life after my zoology degree.
That's right, because of course at the start of that year you headed off to South America. Of course. Yeah. So thinking about that kind of costs and how we might remove them from charity fundraising, I think towards the end of 15, as we headed towards 2016, was let's set up a non-profit. I thought I'll do a bit of fundraising. I'd done so in the past and many years before, run a marathon for charity. think back in 2002. So I thought, well, I'll do another marathon to mark my 50th birthday. Um, and we'll create a fundraising platform of our own, which seems
Yep.
a bit
Why not?
harebrained now. So
Don't just fundraise, make the platform.
exactly, yeah, because we've not got anything to do. Yeah, it was a bit foolish, a bit crazy, but also I think coming from a good place, thinking can we maybe try and solve this particular problem. So thinking about those birthdays, we actually incorporated from memory that business, that non-profit, on your birthday in
Yeah.
2015, which would have been October.
Yep.
Um,
My 23rd.
exactly. And I remember going into the office shortly after that, or maybe even just before we'd incorporated, and sitting down with the development team, the engineers in the telecoms business, and saying, here's an idea, and trying to sell this concept to them of giving up
I think
their.
by then they were used to your crazy ideas as
Yeah,
well.
possibly heard too many. But yeah, do you mind giving up your coffee break and lunch hour and seeing whether we can put together a fundraising platform, a bit like some of the ones that exist out there? But we're not going to charge anyone. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to get paid. So
Yep.
it was
The
kind of
side hustle without the hustle that you said.
the side hustle without the hustle. Exactly. There's no hustle, but plenty of side. And want you to work in the evenings and weekends when you can as well. And I think we set that ambitious target, looking at those birthdays and so on, and saying, let's launch this on my birthday because that would be a really fun thing to do. So we kicked off. We got building. And I think we got probably, well, I guess 2-3 months from October through to that launch date to get the whole thing built, spec'd out. And this would have been your first foray into doing some work. I get you were already out in South America, but you were probably roped into it from there into some degree, I guess.
Yeah, well, I definitely was. And I remember doing, because at that point we obviously had no money. We weren't spending money for marketing. We didn't have any sort of money to
No.
spend on the platform. So I remember I was doing a lot of SEO, lots of writing articles in the back of buses with chickens and stuff in Peru and trying to find internet to upload them all. But yeah, I remember doing that from over there. It's
Fun
good fun.
times. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. The internet connection. Is that article ready? Yeah, it's ready. I've written it. I just I'm waiting for some bandwidth.
Yeah.
But we got it going and we got it launched, albeit late on my birthday on the 17th of Feb, back in 2016.
It
Probably
was a
not.
late night.
Yeah, I was going to say probably not very popular with the rest of the family for arriving home very late. But I do remember the pizzas and nipping downstairs from the office to grab a pizza in Pizza Express, which was literally downstairs from the office, and then going back up again and finishing off and getting launched. And we'd made that commitment at the time. We said, we're going to do this. It's going to be completely free. There'll be no fees, charges at all, zero for charities. Everything is going to be done for the charities, for the donors, for the fundraisers, and what we will undertake to do. So we made one commitment at that time, which was we wanted to support the first £1 million that was raised through the platform. That sounds like a big number, but essentially the costs of processing that £1 million for us were going to be all around the card processing fee. So all the donations were being made via cards. So I get it in loose terms, that was saying that the telecoms business, will be effectively the first corporate sponsor for this harebrained idea of let's have a free fundraising platform. And we were committing, if you think about the percentage card processing fees, probably about £25,000 from the business in corporate fundraising, call
Yeah.
it that, in supporting what we were going to do with Wonderful. So that was our undertaking. We launched on Feb 17th. Can you? I mean, I
Like
think
today,
yeah,
another launch date on Feb 17th.
good point. Yes, so the podcast is out today, celebrating the 8th anniversary of the launch of Wonderful.org, and my 58th birthday. Though I don't look a day over
Happy
20.
birthday.
Thank you very much. Yeah, here we are launching something else on a birthday. I think it will continue forever, this theme. But we launched, and I think there was a surprise. Genuinely, I look back now, and there's a surprise about a mismatch in expectations. We thought this is free. The charities are going to get every penny. what's not to love?
Yeah. Why would a charity not jump at the opportunity to not lose any money along the way?
And again, you were, I know you were doing some of the sport even remotely from there, but I remember asking you about, what's the sense that you're getting from the charities? Is there a nervousness or whatever?
Yeah, there was definitely. I think it was just that whole um concept of if something's too good to be free, sorry, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And this to charities, considering there are countless fundraising platforms and there are none that are 100% free.
Yeah,
How is this possible?
yeah,
What's fun, like what is the motivation? How is it, like what's funding it? How is it possible that you're selling our data? Or I think there are a lot of concerns, and obviously with donations and stuff, you collect things like gift aid data, so people's name, address, and stuff like that. So
yeah,
there was definite nervousness from charities
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. What's the motivation? We
What's the
did get that
catch?
question. What's the catch? Yeah, what's your motivation and what's the catch? That was surprising, though. Again, 2020 hindsight and all that. Not really. It probably
Yeah,
is that sense. Any charity that's signing up for any of these services should be doing its diligence. It should be looking into the platform.
especially the bigger ones. The bigger ones, they have a whole process that they have to follow with loads of different departments to get any platform approved for them to appear on their name, their logo, everything like that's going to show. And ultimately, charities are a brand as well, so
They
they
are.
have to be careful with where they put
No, that
themselves.
and that's understood. Now it was probably less
Yeah, we
understood at the
didn't think
time.
about it at the
No,
time.
no, no. I think we were all kind of wrapped up in that enthusiasm and puppy dog approach to let's just get this out and everyone's going to love it.
Yeah,
And so that was a big surprise. I think it was a big surprise to me. We'd set out thinking we were going to have loads of them on board very, very quickly, and we'd be soon running up to that £1 million and figuring out what we were going to do next. But it was very much a slow burn in those early months. So again, going back to that period, February 2016. The New York Marathon is always the first Sunday in November, so I've got a few months that to start thinking about training for that. But I think some of that running was already underway, and I'd probably already started trying to tap people up for a bit of cash to support. I think it was Mind I was running for in November 2016. But we were finding it pretty heavy going in terms of getting the enthusiasm and interest.
yeah, for sure. It was definitely a lot harder than we'd anticipated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think what all we were doing was just emailing people. There was no ad spend. There was no sense of having a budget to do anything other than support the processing of payments that were going through the platform, albeit in small numbers in the early days.
Yeah, it was just reaching out to as many people as possible and hoping some of them would say yes.
Definitely. Um, One of the themes that we're going to touch on, as well as this early start with a fundraising platform, we want to talk a little bit during this season about that concept. We've already touched on it a little bit, but this is there a conflict between doing good and doing well? So, in the commercial space, we'd been involved in a number of businesses. As you say, you were writing for wonderful content and helping out with some of the outreach to the charities and so on. But it's something that you'd done previously with other businesses. So the
Yeah, with
telecoms
the
business,
telecoms.
yeah. And the telecoms business, again, we'd kind of run into a similar issue. So part of the telecoms business, a big part of it, we were supporting UK call centres with connectivity. So that was one of the areas we were very involved in, running the telecom services for large UK call centres. But the other thing that we were doing at the time we launched Wonderful was operating a free telephone conferencing service. So it wasn't the first time we'd encountered this. There must be a catch.
I remember writing literally a help desk article that was titled like, "What's the catch? How's this free?"
Yeah,
To explain the telephone conferencing, because everyone was like, "Well, how are you making your money if it's free for us?"
yeah.
So having to explain the whole O3 numbers and
It, it
we get some pennies back when you do loads of calls.
Exactly. It's a really tricky one, and that was quite a complex model in the sense that we were getting a wholesale rebate back from the big tier one providers to run the calls, but actually that wasn't costing the call maker anything. It was
Yeah,
included in your
in the
O3 calls
bundled
were
minutes.
included in your bundle minutes, and therefore there was no cost. And but it was a hard one to communicate to people, even technically, to say no, it's not going to cost you anything. Yes, you can even
Yeah.
call them from mobiles and so on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was a similar situation with wonderful.org. What's the rationale? Well, the rationale is we see these people doing amazing things every day, whether that's a charity that's very purposes to support good causes. That's it. That's what it exists to do. And then you've got the people that are volunteering in those charities that, again, maybe doing so, just giving their time completely free of charge because they want to support that cause that's close to the heart. We were looking at the donors, as you mentioned, Daniel raising money and going around his mates at school who've probably not got huge amounts of cash and asking them
Yeah.
to give that. So there's that generosity and that general goodwill from people. Another amazing thing. And the fundraisers themselves, whether it is jumping out of aeroplanes and frightening the mothers and fathers, or whether it's training for an event, doing a triathlon or some
Shaving your
crazy
head.
trek. Exactly. All those things. And I think that, thinking about motivation, that was ours. We wanted to see whether we were in a position to give back, to do good. But we've talked about the doing good and doing well as well. That one can support the other. I think that's quite important. If you're personally in a position that you can give back, that's a great thing. If you as a business are in a position where your business can give back, that's a great thing as well. And I think that was one of the things. Our initial motivation: can we do this? What is that giving back? Is that giving back cash to pay the processing fees in terms of the business as a collective thing? Is it time? Is it
Yeah.
expertise? So for the developers, for the engineers, we want this hosting in a really, really efficient way. You're really good at that. You understand hosting. Help us figure out the best way of doing this. Or you're a developer and you've got some skills in user interface, user experience, those kinds of things. Again, can we work on that and leverage those skills for the greater good? But one of the other things that we're going to be exploring over the next few episodes is the third point, and this is how we generated the strapline for the podcast. Is it a strapline or a tagline? Who knows? But the concept of the wonderful podcast is do good, do well, and then be well. And that's another theme that we'll be exploring. And I just wanted to touch on very, very quickly. I won't dwell on this too much, but one of the ways for me over many years that I've kind of balanced the stresses of work and startup life and all of that kind of thing, it is running. Running's been a really great stress buster for me. So end of a busy day or start of a busy day, getting out there, clearing your head before the day starts or clearing your head as the day finishes. Often describe it as a moving meditation. So it was interesting when 2016 was coming along and training for the New York Marathon as that started to pick up. And you've got that benefit of memory. You forget all of the pain points. You reminded me of the trip home from the first New York Marathon, being with a pair of crutches on 3 seats of the
Yeah.
aeroplane.
I'm amazed you went back and did it again years
I,
later.
I think everyone was, probably not least me, but you do forget those bits, don't you? I think don't they say childbirth's the same kind of thing as well? That's why you have a second child. Your memory plays tricks on you. You can't remember the first. I'm not comparing it, by the way, to childbirth. Running a marathon is one thing, but childbirth something entirely different. I have no doubt. But actually, in all seriousness, that did it feel like a little bit biting off more than we can chew in 2016? And in some senses, there was a lot going on because we did have that day job. We
Yeah.
were trying to launch this fundraising platform.
Juggling a lot at once.
And again with no budget for the platform as well, so that was all calling in favors and spending time doing that, whether it was when we start looking at external hosting, can we get somebody who's going to cover the costs of that? But I think the thing for me, picking up on that theme of being well as well, is that I actually got to a couple of points during 2016 when, rather than being a stress buster, the training for the marathon on top of everything else was actually genuinely adding to the stress, because I thought, I can't back out. Clearly, there's a charity to sport here.
You can't
Um,
skip training.
you can't skip training; it's got to
You
be
can't just
done.
show up and run a marathon.
No, exactly. Um, so I think these are some of the other themes that we'll explore, and I know health and well-being is really important to you, Carmen. I don't know whether you want to just touch on that now. We'll certainly be exploring that in more detail in coming episodes. But
Yeah, for sure. So in 2020, I basically had a bit of a health scare, a bit of a health crisis with thyroid cancer during lockdown, which wasn't the most fun. But now I'm extremely grateful for, because I feel like it's really opened my eyes into how important health is and how much we take it for granted until you're not healthy. So for me, I've started to work a lot on my health since then and make major lifestyle changes. And it's made me realize that well-being can make you feel not just physically well but also mentally. It has huge impacts, that health side of things. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting topic as well for people.
and just as an overview now, and we will go into more detail because clearly that was a really challenging time for you and for the family and so on. Um, but what does that look like? You came out of that almost a new person, and
Yeah, that's literally how it feels.
so again, let's save the detail for later. But in broad terms, that's kind of quite a holistic approach to health that you've taken now in terms of things like nutrition and so on. Can you give us a quick overview?
Yeah, so I basically realized that I think in general, most of my life, I felt like I was on autopilot up until that point. And especially with eating, like I would just eat whatever I wanted to eat. I didn't really give any thought into what I was eating or anything like that. And once I started to explore, like once I got ill, I started to realize how much what I was putting into my body would affect how my body was. So drastically changed my diet. I mean, growing up, you've been vegan like my whole life, so but that was something that never had ever interested me. I ate meat 3 times a day and love that. But yeah, so I changed to vegan, to being a vegan, which weirdly gave me super higher energy levels and stuff like that. Something that I'd always heard the absolute opposite of, you're just going to wither away into nothing. The thing that I think helped me the most was cutting out sugar as well, which again is in absolutely everything, and we don't even think about it. If you read the back of anything, it's probably got sugar in it. And yeah, just drastically changing my diet as much as possible, doing a lot more exercise. I didn't really do much exercise at all. I did at school. I liked sports and stuff like that. But then once I left school and went to uni, that was it. Like, I was just like, well, I'm an adult now. Like, I don't need to do PE.
That does happen so frequently, doesn't it, with people who
Yeah.
and you didn't just do sport. I think you did really well in sport,
Hockey,
in hockey
football.
and
Yeah,
football and so on.
I enjoyed team sport a lot. But
Yeah.
then once I went to uni, um, I ended up just going to university, and then any of my spare time, I was working as a waitress at Yo Sushi's, try and save some money for trips away, which were also probably my biggest passion then. So yeah, I just kind of stopped doing any proper exercise. But 2020 was a big wake up call, and it's something that at the time I probably thought was really horrible and hard. But now probably it's the thing that I'm most grateful for that's ever happened in my life. So
It seems such an odd thing to say, but so understandable as well, so relatable. I kind of get it. It was just such a terrible time, but you seem to have come out of that with some incredible strength. I mean, you mentioned the vegan diet, but your diet in a sense, and I don't know, discipline with all of that seems like vegan diet's a walk in the park in many ways. I mean, how easy is it? It just feels like it can't be easy to be as not as strict, but as regimented. Are they the right words? Just as disciplined, and is it that sense of you've been there and that's what makes it possible because you know what the other side looks like and you know how good you feel now.
I think a lot of it is that, and everyone always says, "Oh, you're so disciplined. I could never do that. I could never," because I try and eat organic as much as possible. I'm also gluten free, sugar free, and vegan. So everyone's like, "Wow, what do you eat? Do you
What
just
do
live
you
off fruit
eat?
and vegetables?" But
Exactly.
no, I eat so much food. I just prepare most of it myself at home,
Yeah.
so I know exactly what I'm eating. And for me, I just feel so much better. Like
Yeah.
physically, mentally, my brain feels so much sharper. Physically, I have so much more energy. I don't feel lethargic. I don't know. For me, it's not. It doesn't feel like a task. It just feels like that's just the normal thing. And
Wow.
why would I not do that when I'm gonna feel so much worse for not? It doesn't feel like a chore at all.
And that,
Um,
I think that's the key to lots of this, isn't it? People talk about consistency, don't they? In whatever you're doing, at the point you get consistent, those, let's compare it to running again. Those morning runs don't become the challenge; they just become part of the day, part of the routine.
exactly.
Yeah, I remember being told that many, many years ago. So I started running when I was 17. So yeah, a long, long time ago. Um, and actually, at that point, you didn't see as many joggers around running. It's become much more popular, probably towards the end of the late 80s, I want to say, but I don't know. But there was one guy at school who said that to me. He said, for me, it's as simple as getting up and brushing my teeth. I'll go out and
Yeah,
run. He was doing a couple of miles. He wasn't running huge distances, but it was just that I'm out for a couple of miles every day, and it's just become that norm.
it's part of the day. It's part of the day,
Part
just
of
like
the day.
having your lunch or whatever. It's just yeah,
Yeah, but it's a great thing. So again, we will. I think it's going to be fascinating to talk a little bit more about that. I think one of the other themes that we'll talk about a little bit is working in families, because we've been doing that for some time, you and I. But obviously, thinking about the
everyone's
businesses,
done the rounds.
everybody in the family has been involved in the business at one point
That
or
some
other.
literally everyone at some point.
Exactly, which is
Mum, Gabby, Dan,
yeah,
everyone
yeah,
is sort of passed through at some point.
which is great. No,
I'm I've stuck around
you've
longer.
stuck around. Yeah, you you'll get that long service medal. So yeah, really well done. But I think that will be an interesting one to explore. The fact that it's
The
Kieran
dynamic.
it's Kieran in the office and Dad at home, and
Dad at home.
how does that work out? So we can talk about that more in due course. Warts and all, I'm sure I'll hear some some truths, but it'll be good. I think it's good for others to share and listen to, or for us to share with others, so that they can listen to what that experience is like as well if they're contemplating doing it, and how well it works out. And also, I guess there'll be some approaches, some tactics for doing that, and making sure that you don't bring the office home and bring home into the office too. So
Yeah.
we can explore some of those themes too.
I think as well, because we've not really touched on this either, but because we're a fully remote team, that also overlaps for everyone. That whole bring like sort of not bringing work home and vice versa.
That's true. Yeah. When does the
So
working day end exactly, and
yeah,
when does it start? No, good point. And there's the positives and negatives around that as well. There's that sense that it'll be really easy to not work, that some people think, and equally there's that sense of it's really easy not to stop working when
yeah,
your laptop's
not
still
to
at
know
home
when
in
to
front of
switch
you.
off.
Exactly. Yeah.
If your desk is in the same room that you watch TV in,
Yeah.
how do you know not to just go back over and send that last email that you forgot to send? Or
Exactly. And now with mobile phones, of course, we're still taking that literally into bed with us and sending messages at night time and so on, which is not great. So again, some of these thoughts about being well, I think, will be quite important as we progress through these various episodes. But let's just turn back to, as we start to get to the end of episode one, the period we were at with wonderful.org. So we were in this situation where we'd created the fundraising platform. We launched the fundraising platform. I think everybody was feeling super pleased with themselves about actually making that a reality and bringing it out.
and
Um,
seeing the donations go through, I remember thinking that was amazing.
it was
Like seeing
amazing.
that
Yeah,
people were actually able to donate and that money
absolutely.
was going to the charity.
I think again, one of the things that's always been fantastic. If everyone to brighten your day up or feel like I need to get some perspective here, one of the things that I'll often do is just open wonderful.org and have a look at 2 or 3 fundraising pages and think, yeah, that gives me that reality check for one. My day may not be as hard as I think because there are people that are struggling with far bigger challenges and people supporting other people in those far bigger challenges. So for me, it's always been a fantastic thing to be able to do. Super proud of it, but also feel quite humble in the midst of all of that wonderfulness. I think I've
Yeah.
just made, is that a word? I might have just made that up. Anyway, where were we in terms of that period? We're still in this sense of, yeah, it's early doors. We're starting to get a bit of interest, but there's probably a little way to go. It felt hard for me. It felt hard in terms of we'd expected probably a bigger response. I'm not saying it wasn't a
Yeah.
positive response, but just bigger. We expected more of an impact, a bigger wave. Um, and that wasn't coming. That
Yeah.
seemed to be quite a long way coming, or further down the line. Um, so I think at that point was the point when we said, well, we've committed to how much we're going to raise. We're a long way off raising it. Let's go.
It's
Let's
going to
go.
take longer than we thought.
Or it's going to take longer than we thought. Let's go back and set some milestones that we can aim towards, and if we achieve them, we'll continue. And actually, if we
Yeah.
don't, maybe we won't continue. Maybe there's no appetite. And I think we started to look at that.
Yeah, it was like targets to try and meet and use those almost as signs of whether this is feasible and possible and the right things to keep focusing our energy on. Yeah, so I think we had, it was 100k we wanted to do through the platform, £100,000 raised for charity through the platform, which I know we'd committed to 1 million, but we realised that was going to take quite a bit longer than we thought at that point. 100 charities signed up.
We were probably, I think when we wrote that down, we were probably about a dozen.
Yeah.
I might be understating it, but it didn't feel like many more. It was certainly.
And it was a dozen that we'd had to spend some time convincing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, oh, sign up. So.
Exactly. And then the third was, from memory, we were looking to do some kind of promotional activity to see whether we could get the name out a bit more, again, with no marketing budget to speak of, because the amount that we'd set aside, that 25,000-30,000, whatever it was, for processing fees, was for processing fees. There was no sense that we were going to add another chunk, or could afford to add another chunk onto that to say, let's promote it and spend some money on AdWords or whatever it was. It's here. If you want to use it, we'd love you to. If you want to tell other charities, please do. But it was very much let's put it out there and see whether they come idea.
Mm-hmm.
So that third target, as it were, was probably less quantifiable. The other two were really easy because we could see whether we'd achieve them.
They were numbers.
Yeah, they were numbers. But the third one was about, let's do something. Let's try and create an event or an activity or something that might generate a bit of press, or get a couple of journalists to be interested in what we were doing at least, and maybe, you never know, get an interview or something like that. And that was the Wonderful Week. Tell us a little bit more about what you remember about the Wonderful Week.
I remember the T-shirts.
That must have been 2017, the Wonderful Week. So I've got a feeling it was after we'd done the marathon and all of that stuff. But
yeah, I think it was towards the end of 2017, but I can't remember.
Feels like it.
Yeah, I remember I still got the T-shirt. Where It's Bed, really nice blue T-shirt with Wonderful Week on it. Yeah, and I remember you were basically just trying to get some bigger names involved and see if they can help us promote the platform and get people to even know that we exist, and also know more about the importance of being able to fundraise 100% fee free as well.
Yeah. And we were successful. We managed through friends of friends. I think there was lots of that with Wonderful. It was all about calling in favours, whether it was the build or anything else. But friends of friends, I think we managed to reach Phil and Julie Neville. So they were supportive, very supportive, big fundraisers themselves for Royal Manchester Children's Hospital. I think they'd raised millions of pounds already. So they were hugely supportive of the idea and came on board, gave their time, and I think basically set themselves some activities to do over a week, which we call the Wonderful Week, and put a little website together for the Wonderful Week. Phil and Julie and the whole family put on their blue T-shirts. We also managed, again, I'm not sure where the contact came from, possibly the PR agency that was supporting YPay at the time. I think it might have come through them, but we managed to get the Olympic cycling team on board as well, the women's Olympic type.
The women's one, yeah.
So that was Katie Archibald. And Hannah Walker, if I remember rightly. Again, really supportive. I think they were supporting Christie, if I remember rightly. So again, we got that page up, and we managed to generate a little bit of press.
And the cycle from Manchester to Liverpool and back in the rain.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, so so that was Simon, our good friend, who again immediately jumped on this and said, "Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ride a Mo bike, Manchester's equivalent of the Boris bike."
Big, heavy, horrible bike.
Heavy, no gears from memory. I think it's just like a fixed gear thing. Really designed to go around round a couple of
A
blocks in
block.
Manchester.
If
um,
that.
Pick up your groceries and go home. And his notion was he was going to ride it from Manchester to Liverpool and back with one of his mates, if I remember rightly. Sadly, he picked an awful day to do this. It was cold,
I
wet,
think
miserable.
it's a given. It's Manchester.
That's true. There is that.
Any day he'd have picked would have been cold and miserable, but I think it was especially cold and miserable
Yeah.
and wet that day.
But that captured the press probably more than anything else. I
Yeah.
mean, Phil Neville's a super fit guy, so Phil Neville doing some sporting activities over a week, yeah, it's great, it's fantastic, really supported. But is it a story for the press? And funnily enough, I think Simon and his mobike probably gained more column inches than Phil. It's funny, isn't it? You look back at these things, but it was very interesting, great fun. So we were there. I think we'd hit our 100 charities by hook or by crook, and it felt like a long 18 months or so, to get to that point. We'd done the 100,000 as well. Nothing to do with my marathon. We raised a couple of grand probably for that. But so a lot of charities were doing bits and pieces, or not a lot,
Yeah.
but enough. We're doing bits and pieces to make it feel like we might be onto something.
We had a few, especially some of the smaller ones that we were supporting, that were doing pretty much all their fundraising through the platform as well, that got very keen on the platform and started using it quite heavily as well. So
and I think
they helped us get there for sure.
That feels like a great point at which to stop. So thank you very much for listening. If you're still listening, if you've stayed with us to the end of episode 1, that's fantastic. We hope you'll join us in episode 2. Carmen,
Yes.
Do you want to share some deets?
Yes, so we have set up an email address. It is hello@wonderfulpodcast.com. Hopefully nice and easy. So we would love to hear some stories of how you guys are doing good, doing well, and being well. So if you want to share those, wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever it is that this all ends up, if you could please subscribe, give us a like, leave a review, drop a comment, all of those things, we'd really appreciate it.
There you go. That's our pitch over. Thank you very much, Carmen. And thank you again for listening. Hope you join us for episode 2.
Thank you, guys.